Now, here we are dedicating a monument to Richard Somers and his crew. And it reminds me that 150 years ago, almost to the day, Americans got together in a cemetery in Gettysburg and dedicated a monument to the heroes of the Civil War. And Abraham Lincoln gave a speech that time and reminded us that the hero, Richard Somers and that crew, they don't need to be dedicated. They don't need to be honored, because by their deeds, they dedicated themselves far more than we can do with our words and statutes today. Abraham Lincoln said the real reason we are here is to dedicate not them, but ourselves to the unfinished work that they gave their lives for. That this nation, conceived in liberty, a government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And that's why it is so important for us to know the story of Richard Somers, not to say, oh, we used to have great men in this country, but to find out what those qualities are so we can live them for ourselves and teach them to our children and grandchildren. Now, when you hear the story, the Barbary pirates, the Barbary War, a forgotten little war far away of no real significance, that's sometimes what you see in history books. But let's learn a little bit about the world that Richard Somers lives in, because now we know, for example, that the so-called Barbary kingdoms of North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Libya, small, poor countries of no significance whatsoever. And the United States, a great world power. So we think, well, what's the big deal? You know, America, a great world power, fighting these little countries over in North Africa. But 200 years ago, it was a far different world. To give an example, we had Columbus Day last week. Christopher Columbus, Italian sea captain, leaves Italy, goes to Spain, discovers America. Amerigo Vespucci, Italian navigator, goes to Portugal, explores America. Giovanni Verrazzano, Italian navigator, leaves Italy, goes to France, explores America. Giovanni Cabotti, John Cabot, he changed his name, worked for England, discovered America. Why did all these Italian navigators, brilliant men of their time, why did they have to leave Italy? Why did they have to go to these little countries on the Atlantic? Well, it's because they were driven out of their homeland, driven out of the Mediterranean. Because you see, at that time, the major power in Europe was the Muslim Turks, who had just wiped out the Eastern Roman Empire. The largest church in Europe used to be in Constantinople, San Sophia's. Became the largest mosque in the world. The Turkish army was at the gates of Vienna, had conquered Hungary, was threatening the survival of Europe. And their seagoing allies in North Africa, Algeria, Morocco, Tunisia, Tripoli, they were the naval arm of this mighty power that threatened the existence of Europe. And Europe survived, but 300 years later, they were still a very, very dangerous force. And during that period of time, 1 million Europeans were captured and sold into slavery into North Africa, which gave those Barbary kingdoms money and power undreamed of. When the United States, and by the way, they were so powerful that even the powerful English, Spanish, and French navies, the most powerful sea powers at the time, were unable to protect their people from being captured and sold into slavery by the Barbary kingdoms. And so they got in the habit of paying tribute. They would pay money to be left alone, and if their people were captured, they'd pay ransom to get them back. When America became independent, our American ships were also captured. And we turned to the Europeans and said, we all got to get together and fight this. And the Europeans said, hey, you're not very much. You learn to pay the tribute like the rest of us. And that's the way it was. Now, America at that time, when the Turks and the Barbary kingdoms were powerful, America at that time was very puny. Country of only 5 million people. we didn't have any navy. West of the Mississippi was run by the Spanish and the French, who threatened us, and nobody took America seriously. They said we were lucky that we won the revolution. If the French didn't bail us out, we'd still be part of England. And they were waiting for us to collapse. And so Americans, not that we just got attacked in the Mediterranean, French pirates attacked us in the Caribbean. And they said, pay ransom to France now. What was the response? As that sign said, Americans came up with a slogan, millions for defense, not 1 cent for tribute, out of this puny little country that nobody respected. And then we sent our Navy over there. And Richard Summers, 23 years old. Most of the other commanders in there, Stephen Decatur, 23 years old. And even the commander, Admiral Preble, said, why, you've given me a pack of schoolboys to fight these pirates that have terrorized Europe for 300 years. By the way, just as a legal term, they weren't really pirates, because pirates were outlaws. These were called corsairs, or privateers. They had a license from the government to rob and kill any non-Muslim they found and sell them into slavery. It was all legal. In fact, if any of these so-called pirates were captured, the punishment for a captain was death. But these Barbary kingdoms, if they were captured, they were prisoners of war, protected by international law. And so America alone went to end this practice. A handful of ships, led by a handful of boys. The Europeans laughed at us. These stupid Americans, they don't know what they're getting into. Within 3 years, that pack of boys did something that the Europeans had not done in 300 years. One ship after another they knocked off. That Battle of August, that Battle of the Gunboats, was so amazing that Admiral Nelson, the chief naval officer of the British, commended the Americans for doing what they couldn't do. Pope Paul VII said, these Americans have done more to protect Christendom than the major powers of Europe in centuries. This is the impact that the Americans made, and of course Richard Summers was part of that. So what were the qualities that Americans had back then? And of course many of those qualities are not very politically correct these days, are they? One was that sometimes it is necessary to go to war and for young men to die so that others may be free. We're told that's not a virtue anymore, but think about this. Richard Summers, what brought the Summers family to Summers Point in the first place? They were Quakers, a religion of peace, a religion that fled the wars of Europe to find peace in America. But even Quaker families said some things are worth fighting for. Freedom, not selling others into slavery, that's a powerful message of that war. The other quality was the youth in independence. The fact that Americans respected people by what they did, what they achieved, not by what their father did, not by inherited wealth, not by inherited families. Everybody was expected to prove themselves. So Americans appointed people with talent and ability and hard work to positions of power, and also the Americans learned how to think for themselves. While other navies waited for the admiral to tell them what to do, the Americans seized the opportunities and were victorious, and we astounded the world. So for the first 100 years, and by the way, Richard Summers, like most Americans back then, he finished school at age 15. Knew mathematics, the classic, how to sail a sailing ship when he was 17 years old, sailing ships from New York to Philadelphia over open ocean with no modern navigation. Normal for a 17-year-old to do. Now I don't know if he could get working papers to do something like that, do it with everything. But then they finished school at 15, learned a useful trade, so by 23, Richard Summers and his whole generation, very, very experienced. Now the final lessons of this forgotten war. First of all, Americans fought that war, got the respect of the world, which we didn't have before. Number two, that was America's first war to end slavery. And remember that Europeans were being sold as slaves, and during the time, a lot of Americans, like Ben Franklin, noticed the hypocrisy of Americans bringing blacks from Africa to America as slaves, and yet being outraged that Americans were being captured in Africa as slaves. And that hypocrisy fueled the anti-slavery movement. And you'll notice that after Richard Summers, that's when suddenly the anti-slavery movement catches on in America. And the other thing, the fact that sometimes you must defend the country when necessary. We don't like war, we don't want war, but sometimes freedom is worth fighting for. Those are the lessons of America. And remember, Richard Summers was once a national hero. He was in every school book, every play, every fiction. But now, of course, because his message may not be fashionable today, he's forgotten. So that's why, as Abraham Lincoln said, it is for us, the living, to dedicate ourselves not just to the memory of Richard Summers, but to make sure that America remains the nation it was when he was alive. Thank you very much.